Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Deirdre Tshien. Deirdre, welcome.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Deirdre Tshien. I am currently founder and CEO of CapShow. CapShow is both software and coaching that helps entrepreneurs not only turn their stories into a bank of captions and emails, but actually turn followers into buyers on social media. So that's what we do. Now, gosh, a little bit about me. I've been in entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur for the last almost 10 years, so almost a decade. I live in New York City right now. I grew up, you might be able to tell from my accent, in Australia. So I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and I moved to New York about 3 years ago. It's been heaps of fun since then, as you can imagine, with the pandemic hitting. But yeah, it's been a wild ride.
And you've got businesses in Australia still, is that right?
I do, yeah. So our first business that we started we actually started in hospitality, which I would kind of recommend not starting if you're gonna try entrepreneurship. Do not start in hospitality. But it was like, if nothing else, it definitely teaches you tenacity, resilience, all of the really hard things. So we started a dessert bar called the Chockpot, grew that to 5 locations, started a burger restaurant alongside that, Stacks on Burgers, and we have 2 locations, and yeah, they're still operating in Sydney.
So what makes you say that you shouldn't start in that particular industry then? That's
an
interesting one.
Yeah, and maybe because we didn't even have a background in hospitality. So my husband and I started it, and again, as I said, no background. So I am first migrant. My parents came from Malaysia, and I was on that academic track. Did all of the things. I learned how to play piano. I got tutored from 3rd grade. Went to the top school in the state. The one thing that I did not do was do medicine, which my parents were disappointed about. But I did do a law degree, and I went into banking. I worked in an investment bank. So was, down the line, like that corporate path. And my husband, he was actually studying medicine, funnily enough, but he was hating it. And I knew that corporate wasn't going to be, my long-term plans. So we were kind of in this place where we didn't really know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But we moved out and he fell in love with baking. And I mean, really driven by the fact that I love my desserts. And so he just started experimenting and baking and trying to make all of our favorite things, really. One of them was this molten chocolate lava cake that we used to travel 30 minutes for in Sydney to this rustic Italian restaurant. And he was trying to perfect that. And from there really was how the Chockpot came to be, because we just decided, like, he has a passion. He's really enjoying that, doing that. I didn't really have, my own thing, but I knew that I wanted to go into business. We didn't know what we had no idea what we were getting into. We had no idea the amount of upfront costs it takes to fit out a place. So we were kind of found ourselves in a lot of debt from day zero. We didn't know the world of, leases and, like signing up to specifically like a retail lease. We didn't know any of that, but we did it anyway. And honestly, if we had known, I don't know whether we would have done it. But honestly, I've not regretted it. I mean, that's why I'm kind of a tongue-in-cheek say, don't start in hospitality, but honestly, like the amount that I've learned through this journey I would not have done it any other way.
So how does it look now? Is that still one of your businesses?
Yeah. So so the journey is we grew the Chockpot relatively quickly. And I think that in itself was a really big learning as well, because I don't know, call it ego, call it me being so driven by goals, by, wanting to achieve goals. But we had in mind that we wanted X number of stores by X date. And so that led us probably down a slightly wrong path in terms of just getting into pretty bad deals with landlords that in places that were just not right for us. And so we did have to close a couple just from the so we literally had to fail them. And then, a couple of others, our leases just ran out and we decided to not renew the lease, especially because we were over here in New York. So we do have one location of the Chockpot still running, and we still have the 2 Stacks on Burger locations running as well.
And the Chockpot is like desserts or cafe or?
Yeah, so it dessert cafe, I guess. So it does do, hot chocolates, coffees, other cold drinks, but desserts is really the main thing that we offer.
So at what point did you decide to do that? Because thinking about what the transition is there from law school to starting your own dessert place, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, so I guess it really, I went into corporate, as I mentioned. I was working in a bank, and at the time I was actually fortunate enough to be working on a rather large project. It was one of those, once in a decade kind of regulatory reforms that was happening in Australia. And so because I had this particular experience, I was put in to lead a particular stream of work. And so this project, this program of work had visibility all the way up to the CEO. It was quite a big deal. And so I say that I was really fortunate because I was, but I was sitting in these rooms with super senior people, and just seeing, the politics that was happening, the back channeling, all of these things, and I just did not, I kind of knew from there that corporate was something that I just did not want to stay in. And so, the transition to desserts was literally just because Ash, my husband, had a passion for creating and making them, and I had a passion for eating them. So there was really no other, at the time, thought put into it, really. It was just I think this is something that we can do, and why not try? We didn't have, anything holding us back. It's not like we had a family. We had, other obligations. We just decided to go for it. And it was tough. It was really, really tough. But we knew we had to make it work. So that was kind of the early journey.
And what made you decide to move to New York from Australia?
Yeah, so this is, we probably, now 4 years now ago, I was actually, let me tell you the story. I was, I think I startled awake. It was a Thursday night, I actually remember. I startled awake and for some reason, and realized that Ash wasn't in bed yet. And so I kind of stumble out, and I'm like, well, what are you still doing up? Come to bed. And and he was sitting at the dining room table on his laptop, and he was just ashen. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, no, don't worry. Go to sleep. We'll talk about it in the morning. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to sleep now. What's happening? And he basically said, he just got off the phone with someone else from the team in our city store. So that was our biggest grossing store. And he was saying, she was saying she had raised to him that she didn't know how it was happening, but she believed that our store manager was stealing from us. And so he was like, so Ash had spent pretty much the last couple of hours looking at our back end, looking at our point of sale system, all of that, to figure out how he was doing it. And he finally figured out how. And then when he was looking at sort of the numbers, and it was just racking, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that was being stolen, essentially. And so that kind of set off, in my mind, it's funny when something like that, you almost need this pattern interrupt, because funnily enough, we had kind of built a hamster wheel for ourselves, we were just doing and doing and doing and going. So I kind of wanted to leave this other hamster wheel of corporate, but we just found ourselves in one. And so having something like that happen, we kind of re-looked at everything and was like, is this what we want to be doing with our lives right now? Is this where we want to be? Is this what we want to be thinking about and being consumed with? And it came to a point where we're no, this isn't what we want to be doing. I've always had aspirations to live and work overseas. And so it was like, obviously we went through a lot of, discussions and talking, and we were just like, you know what, F it, like, let's just go. At the same time, I actually started on a new business idea with another co-founder who I had met in corporate, actually. And we were working on a fashion technology idea. And so I was kind of like, well, what better place, the coming together of fashion and technology than New York? And so, so Ash and we made the decision to move. And then when I spoke to my co-founder, Bonner, I was like, this is kind of what we decided to do. I'm sure we can still make it work. I'll like target Northern Hemisphere, I don't know, and you'll do Southern Hemisphere, and, we'll try to make it work. But in the end, I was just like, you know what, do you just want to come with us? Like, why not? Let's just give it a go. And yeah, she said yes. And so I came with my husband, my cat, and my co-founder.
Wow.
To New York City. Yeah.
That's amazing. Just touching on the experience you had when a employee was stealing from you. What are your thoughts going through that now? What did you learn from that? And obviously, what kind of action did you take?
Yes. Wow. Okay, so going through it, I think the hardest part isn't even about the money. I mean, obviously the money stings like heck, but it's really more the betrayal. And it sounds it sounds really dramatic when I say it like that, but because you kind of go, well, it's just an employee in your team. But we were still a small team. It feels small. Like, we did have about 40 total team members. But in terms of our management team, like the people who we really trusted, that was really small. And we were basically training him and coaching him to essentially become almost like Ash's right-hand man. Like, he was going to become essentially, second in charge in the business. And so that was the level of trust that we had in him. And then so to have found out that someone like that, who we like to think we were really giving to, would do something like that, was a big betrayal of trust. And so that was a really, really hard thing to, I think, wrap our minds around. And then, coupled with that is that we take such pride in, our team culture and our even our judgment in character. Like, we take a lot of pride in that. And almost to feel like we were to know, actually, I should say, that we were so wrong about someone, is just like, you just start to question everything. We were questioning ourselves. We were questioning like literally other people in the team, because we were like, how did this get so out of hand? How was he able to, like, surely there were other people in on it. So then, that started to permeate through to the team as well. And it was just not like, all of that was just, it was just it was just, I don't know, it was just this snowstorm of like a lot of things happening, both emotionally and, like team. And like, I would just be walking down the street and then I'd suddenly be like crying for some reason. It was like, because I think no matter where the betrayal comes from, you still feel it. You still really feel it in your gut. So I think, so feeling wise, that it was really, really bad at the time. Looking back, I mean, obviously we have the benefit of hindsight, and we have the benefit of being able to get past that. And like, would I change that? Probably. Like, I'm a big believer that everything does happen for a reason. If that hadn't happened, it wouldn't have jolted us out of, the state that we were in. It wouldn't have probably led us to this move to the other side of the world, which I'm so thankful for. It wouldn't have led to a lot of opportunities to like what I get to do now. All of where I am, where I am now, Ash is where he is now because of what happened. So I can't ever like regret that, if that makes sense. So
what do you say to let's say the person who perhaps hasn't put safeguards into their business through just being busy, and might be facing that same thing? What advice do you give them?
Yeah, it's a hard one, like, because we never put those safeguards in, because it didn't even come to mind. I mean, call it naive, but like it just did not even cross our minds that that would happen, you know. And so I don't know, like, you know, looking back, I mean, yes, obviously we should have, but I don't know if, like, unless we probably would have if we were told. That was probably the only reason why, like, we couldn't have thought of it, because, you know, you just don't know what you don't know, and we never would have thought that that would happen. So I definitely would encourage, like, you know, encourage people, especially if they're working in like a cash kind of business. I mean, now we've actually, like, we've completely moved away from cash in our businesses because of, pretty much because of that. We're all now completely cashless, cashless business, even though it's hospitality. So yeah, you know, as much as possible that if you can, I mean, I know that the pandemic has meant that a lot of businesses have moved cashless, just because, you know, no one wanted to actually, you know, handle physical things. But that, you know, if we're talking about this specifically, then that was a really great way to essentially systemize it, so that there wasn't that kind of risk. Now, there's always going to be risk in business, in every business, and there's always going to be an element of like, will your staff be, you know, will your team be the types of people that you think that they are? There's kind of no going around that. I know for me, also part of the reason why we knew we had to move was because we could very easily go into the micromanage, into the, you know, we will, like, everything is going to be, we're going to like close every single loop and every single gap. But I also know from experience of being, you know, having worked in corporate and stuff, that the worst place and the most disempowering place to work in is somewhere where you don't have the latitude, you are micromanaged, all of that. And so I knew as well that we had to remove ourselves so that we didn't get into that place. So that's the thing. It's like, how do you balance, like, trying to mitigate as many risks as possible without, you know, clipping the wings of your team? Because ultimately, if their wings are clipped, you cannot grow and you cannot scale. Like, that's what it comes down to. You have to have a level of trust in other people, fortunately or unfortunately. Like, that's just, you know, and yeah, that means that you are going to get bitten in the backside every now and then. But I think that kind of has to come with, you know, the joys of entrepreneurship and growing a business.
So you're in New York, and remind me, did you say it's a fashion business?
So we came over here with a fashion technology idea, and we really hit the ground running with like testing it, because we didn't want to, you know, put a lot of money into development without it being something that we knew would solve a problem. Now, it stemmed from a problem that I had, for sure, but I don't know whether it was a big enough problem, or B, a problem that other people would, you know, like want to potentially pay for a solution for. So our hypothesis was that our target customers would be either like young professionals or college or university students. So, you know, we went to Columbia University, went to NYU campuses, even Wall Street, and we just like started talking to women. Like, it was, you know, it's so bizarre because I'm actually a really big introvert. So it's actually real, like, it took a lot for us to, like, especially for me, to just go up to a stranger and be like, hey, my name's Deirdre and we're doing this thing, and would you mind, you know, sparing a few minutes for us? But we did that. We had a lot of really great conversations. We even went back with a prototype to get them to, you know, test it for us. And funnily enough, it got to a point. So I was actually, my husband and I had to go to London. So we were in London when I hopped on a call with Bonner, with my co-founder. I was working on kind of the back end smarts, like our sort of, I guess, machine. And I think I got to the point where we had to have, because we were just doing, and, you know, that was all great, but stepping back, and I think almost like going, like almost leaving physically, like going on a bit of a trip elsewhere, forced me to step back and look at it and be like, do we think that we are actually solving a big enough problem? Do we actually think that this is something that people are going to pay for? And it was a really hard discussion to have. Luckily, you know, Bonner's just like amazing. We're totally always on the same page. And we got to the point that the decision that while it was a problem, it probably wasn't big enough that people were willing to change their habits for. So they were already solving for their problem in other ways, and there wasn't a big enough incentive for them to change the way that they were doing that. So we actually decided to fail the business. So yes, and then then we were like, oh gosh, what are we going to do now? We're in a totally different country where, but and talk about everything happening for a reason. So we were actually, at the same time that we were talking to potential customers, we were also talking to boutiques and brands, because, we kind of needed both sides of the marketplace. And every time, we had spoken to them, the one thing we were like, what is your biggest problem? What is the one thing that we can help you solve for? And for them, it was always acquisition. Acquisition was the number one big thing, which totally makes sense. Like for any business, really, acquisition is such a big pain point. And so we actually went back to them and we were like, look, we've decided not to go ahead with this idea, but how about if we just work with you on, because we knew quite a bit about marketing anyway, about like running ads, and also from a boutique perspective, I call it the live conversion method, but essentially doing live virtual trunk shows and things like that. So we actually started working with some boutiques and brands. And from there, it kind of so we kind of built this quasi agency. We didn't even intend to, but we kind of built this thing up to a point where we were like, I think every business gets to this point where you have to make a decision as to whether you want to keep scaling the thing that you're in, or whether you want to be leveraging your time in a different way. So for us, we actually wanted to start to work with people who were a little bit more in the beginning of their journey. So we went into coaching instead, and helping to coach e-commerce business owners about these, everything that essentially marketing that we were doing for across a few different brands. And that was how we fell into coaching. And then, fast forward, that was probably like 18 months ago. And then I kind of again, we were the same thing that, it felt reminiscent of that hamster wheel again. Like we were just doing the things because we had fallen into it in a way. And there was kind of there was no significant reason to pull us out of there. But because I had been in a similar place like that before, I think I kind of knew the signs. I kind of knew when I got this feeling that I was feeling a little bit misaligned with, where we were heading and what we were doing. And in the meantime, before that, when we were working with clients, one of the biggest pain points that kept coming up time and time again was around content creation for social media. Because again, as a business, we all know we have to have some kind of social media presence. Nothing else when we're Googled, we look legitimate. Mm-hmm. But it was a struggle for businesses, especially when you're sort of a one-man band, to actually be able to spend time on what fulfillment and on all these other things, when you're having to spend all this time on creating content and stuff like that. So we actually started building another software. I was just building the engine again behind it around that, where entrepreneurs can essentially tell their stories. And it's kind of it was really great. A client put it this way: it was kind of a mix of journal prompts and Mad Libs. You kind of answer particular questions that form a story, and then at the back of that, the software itself creates a bank of captions and emails for you to use. And so we were working on that, and and then came this feeling of I feel misaligned with our coaching business and what we're trying to do there. And I think a lot of that was just probably the burnout that I was kind of feeling, trying to keep on top of everything and trying to be ahead of the game as well, trying to constantly be looking at and in e-commerce, it's never ending. Not to say that other industries aren't, but especially in e-commerce, because it's you have so many different platforms and so many different, that you have to just stay on top of. And that was burning me out. And so I was actually at this event it's Funnel Hacking Live. I don't know if you heard it. It's Russell Brunson's event. And on the last day, he had Tony Robbins speak. And Tony Robbins was talking about the 3 patterns of focus that you need to have in order to have a fulfilling life. And he was just even talking about the first one when I had my own epiphany, because obviously this was on my mind, even if it was subconsciously, like, because it wasn't like I was consciously thinking, what am I going to do now? What should we do? Like, you know, because we were still doing the things. But I think in the back of my mind, I just had this feeling that something wasn't quite right. And so he was talking about focusing, like when a lot of us focus a lot on what's missing and not what we have. And that made me realize that that's what I've been doing for the longest time. I was constantly focusing on what was missing. And that's where the burnout was happening versus what I have. And what I have, like in that moment, what really stood out for me was that I am this introvert. I am this person with all of these flaws and all of these that I had turned into excuses for why I couldn't do things or what was holding me back and things like that. And yet, even so, I was still able to build successful businesses. I was still able to, lead teams inside corporate. Even though I wasn't the loudest person, I wasn't the one who was, dominating a meeting, like none of that, but I was still able to do these things, even though I was XYZ, even though I was and so what that made me realize was that, we are all remarkable, right, in our own way. Because I know for me, I never used to enjoy sharing my story because I always thought, well, who would care? Who would care about what I have to say? What do I even have anything worthy of sharing anyway? But, but for me, it was like, but I do, I am remarkable in my own way, but so is everyone else. So literally everyone's lives is just a series of stories. They just have to have the confidence to be able to share it. And so that's what then led us on this other path, because I was like, okay, we have to do this. We have to go down this, where this is leading us, which is, thankfully, aligned with CapShow, so aligned with our software, but very much more about how do we help entrepreneurs, especially, find their remarkability and then share that so that they can actually generate leads, or build their credibility, get visibility and reach, and generate leads ultimately to make sales.
So the epiphany from what Tony Robbins said made you think that you wanted to pursue the caption company more. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so definitely CapShow, and definitely, but how do we do that in a way that, because we're all, a part of me as well is I am also a lazy, I call myself a lazy CEO, call myself a sloth boss, but in the right way, right? Because I want to be efficient. I want to systemize. I want to automate. I want to do all the things because, the hustle isn't really quite what the hustle was, 10 years ago, when it was like, to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be working 24 hours, 7 days a week. Now it's like, well, we all, I think, appreciate and know that we need a balanced life. The only way that we can actually grow a successful company is if we look after ourselves. And so how do we do that intelligently? So part of, the CapShow, the software, is part of automation and making things easier. But we also know that there's so much more that wraps around social media. There's so much more that wraps around lead generation than just hoping that it'll work. And a lot of that comes down to systemization and delegation to really cost-effective resources. So I'm talking about, VAs who have really great English, who will just head down and do the things. That's how we've been able to generate a lot of our leads organically, and still do. But we have a full system so that I personally only spend an hour and a half to 2 hours a week on social media activities. So things that I need to do personally because my face is still, the brand, so I still have to be in content. I still have to create the stuff, but honestly, the type of content that all comes from my VA team, from my VA, the editing, they do that. Even caption writing comes from software. So I literally spend, 15 minutes writing the thing, and then out, it comes a bank of captions. Lead gen, my VA does that. Like literally everything else my VA does, so that I don't even have to touch my social media. And that is really what I wanted to empower. How do we have entrepreneurs realize their remarkability? Because they need to realize that the way that they create connections is through their stories, through their experiences, through their perspective, but then also generate the leads without having to be, consumed by social media and the suck, almost the time-consuming suck of it. So that was kind of what I wanted to bring together. So that's what we're working on now.
So how old is CapShow and how's it going?
Yeah, so the software itself we launched October of last year, so it's not very not very old. We launched our coaching program in December, so last month actually. So also not very old, but it's going phenomenal. Like I think that the message is landing. Like and the fact that I feel so aligned to it, because this is exactly where it just feels like I'm in flow. Like everything is just feels that much simpler, easier, because, again, I'm focusing on what I have and not what's missing. And then when I can do that, everything just feels like it's falling into place. Like when I speak to people, even when I think about, we talk about messaging a lot. So, when I can talk to the symptoms so clearly, I can talk to the after point. I can paint the picture so clearly, because it is literally the journey that I went through myself. I didn't intend for that to be the thing, but, on the other side of it, that's just where, so everything just seemed to fall into place. So I am really, really looking forward to this year, because we just literally launched and we did a phenomenal sales for launch. But that's launch, so it's a little bit different. And we had like a ready and waiting audience as such, but now it's really about, okay, how do we work off that base to keep growing it and really start to scale it? That's our focus this year.
So, it reminds me of the difference between a business owner and an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur is always sort of, I know that you've said that you've made a slight change in this, but they're looking for problems to solve. And they're in lots of different businesses. So, the business owner is one business typically, and they'll be in it for a long period of time. Whereas you've done what, 4 businesses?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 businesses. And it makes me think, what have you got in store for the future? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, wow. Well, I know that this CapShow is where I need to be right now. Like I'm so excited about where we're going to be taking the software. We're going to be investing obviously a lot more time and money into it this year. Right, like it's quite MVP right now. So it's literally like written. You answer questions, and then it's a pretty what would I call the it's almost like templatized in a way, whereas we want it to become a lot smarter, so have it genuinely AI driven, and from the perspective of like what does the data tell us about what converts, from a caption perspective, from a copy perspective. So I'm really excited about that. And then on the front end, rather than, because I know that people learn and interact differently, so some people are like, they do like writing, whereas I know a lot of people are talkers, they prefer to verbalize. So we want to be able to have a mechanism where, you can like either talk into it or upload a video or something, and that will essentially transcribe, and then come like at the back of that we'll have captions created. So we have a lot of things anyway that I want to be working on and to really make the software itself so much more powerful, so much more intuitive, so much more user-friendly. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about creating the next generation of sloth bosses. That's kind of our purpose. That's kind of our goal. Is, as I said, it's not about the hustle anymore. Like it's about how do we be intelligently lazy. like, because we know that we need to look after ourselves, but hey, let's do it in a smart way where we are leveraging data, we are leveraging people, we are leveraging systems to actually take the right actions, and do them in the right way. So that's kind of what I'm really looking forward to as well.
So would you say those are your goals, or have you got something separate?
Yeah, from a business perspective, yeah, for sure. I'm really, I really do. I so believe in, that next generation of sloth bosses. Like, I really, really want to, I'm really pumped and so passionate about helping entrepreneurs in this way, because I think this is going to be a game changer for them. Like, to be able to, have the permission to not do the 24/7 hustle, but also actually have the strategy, the systems, the support, the help on the ground, the know how to do that, I'm really excited about that.
So if someone is watching this right now and they fit into the category of someone who is just working all the time, what do you say to them?
Find a way to not. The burnout thing is real. It's, I've lived it for a long, long time, because, when we started our first business, I actually still had to work full time because we were in so much debt. So I was like, from corporate to night job, we'll leave the store at midnight, go to bed, wake up. Like, it was just day after day. So I know how painful it can be and how unsustainable it is. And the number one asset that you have in your business is you. So if you want to have any chance of success, you've got to look after yourself, and you've got to learn, if you haven't already, how to systemize, how to delegate, and how to be okay with other people doing it. That might not be 100% you, but it's going to be, and it's going to be so much better for you to be able to create that kind of leverage, because it just frees you up to be creative. Like, that's really where then your juice is going to come from.
Great advice. Deirdre, where's the best place for people to find you and maybe try out CapShow? Do you have like a demo or not?
Yeah. So we do have a 14-day free trial. That's at CapShow, CAPSHO.com. If you want to, there's also a demo video on that website. If you want to come along to I hold a free 4-day Scale Your Funnel with Social Bootcamp, then definitely come along to that. That's at capshowunlocked.com/scale.
Nice. Thank you for coming on and telling your story. Lots of good learnings there.
Thank you. It was my absolute pleasure. And thanks so much for having me on.